Michele Neff Hernandez with the International Grief Institute, and this is Moments of Hope. Tonight, we are talking about surviving loss of a spouse. That's something that affects tens of thousands of people every year in the United States and around the world. And it presents certain kinds of challenges that other types of losses don't face. And we want to talk about it tonight. And our expert guest is Michele Neff Hernandez. Michele lost her 39-year-old husband, Phil, in a cycling accident in 2005. And she turned her pain into purpose and went on to found the Soaring Spirits International and Camp Widow. So welcome to the show, Michele.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing your story and your wisdom. And I'm really excited about it because it's really needed. So, first thing is, when you lost Phil back in 2005, you were suddenly an unexpected widow. You had a traumatic loss. What went through your head back then?
The very first thing I thought was, I have no idea how to do this. Like, how do you go from having a person who's alive and well in a part of your life, and suddenly people are asking you questions about funerals and, what you want to do with everything under the sun. And so the very first thing, I just remember that real sense of not having any idea how I was supposed to do this widowed thing, and feeling very much like, how could it apply to me?
Right, and no one hands you a playbook of what to do when you become a widow. So, what was your biggest challenge back then?
I think in the beginning, the biggest challenge is getting physically used to the fact that they're not coming home. Mm-hmm. And, that sense of the door is going to open, or the shoes that are sitting by the door are going to be used, or one day you're going to wake up and this is going to just be a nightmare that you now no longer have to deal with. I think that's the first part, but I think my experience over the last 13 years really has taught me that the hardest part for me and for many widowed people that I've met is creating a life that you care about again. That's the biggest challenge, is to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take this experience, include it in what I'm going to do next, and I'm somehow going to figure out how to create a life that I want to live. That takes as much time as it takes.
Yeah, that takes some that transition. Mm-hmm. So how long, what was your time frame, in looking back, between the time the accident happened to that time where you made that, that cognizant decision to say, okay, I'm not going to lay in this bed all day long. I'm going to turn my pain into purpose and, rebuild myself. What was that time frame?
Well, initially, before I started Soaring Spirits, really what was driving me was I had these questions that I couldn't figure out how to answer. How long do I wear my wedding ring? What do I do with the shoes? How can I kind of take this life that we have and do something with it? And the only person I could think, or the people I imagined was other widowed women. And so I didn't know where to find them. When I decided that I wanted to start asking these questions, I had this idea that maybe I could start interviewing other widows and they could tell me what I would do. And so I did do that. About 4 months after Phil died, I just decided I was going to start interviewing other widowed people. And over that next year, I interviewed 30 different widows, asked them 50 very practical questions that were just things that I really wanted to know, and thought that what I would be doing when I was done with it was have the material for a book to be able to kind of address some of the practical issues of widowhood. But then what happened was I accidentally created a community, and every time I met with another widowed person, I felt understood. I felt like I wasn't crazy. It didn't matter if our circumstances were terribly similar, so long as the thing that we shared was that we had experienced the death of our spouse or partner and that we were trying to work it out. And I learned so much from those women in that first year. And mostly what I ended up learning was to trust myself, that the way they did it didn't have to be the way I did it, that everybody has a different path through this, but that you do have to go through, you can't go around. And so by the time we were sort of done with that sense of it, it had been a year and a half about by the time I finished all the interviews and started sort of compiling what I thought might be the book. But really, I think that was just the first step. I still see this widowed experience as an ongoing journey. You know, my daughter will be getting married in a couple months, and we're going to miss Phil very much, as well as welcoming all the new people who are a part of our lives since his death. And so you feel like we sometimes have the expectation that there's going to be like a final line, but really it's just sort of a moving through that continues to weave itself into the future as we continue sort of living our present.
Right. I'm hearing a bit of feedback. Do you hear that?
Okay.
Went away.
Okay, good. Let's
Okay. So, actually your time frame is quite quick. And that's really impressive. But did you find in the beginning when you were seeking out other widows that you had trouble finding widows in your generation?
So I do want to just quickly address the quickness of my transition personally. I paid for it. So as I was looking back, compiling my data, I was reading my personal calendar and realizing that every time I did one of those interviews, I was sick. I ended up falling out of work. I hadn't really connected those dots at all. Is that feedback bothering? I can still kind of hear it myself.
A little bit, yeah.
Let me see if this is real live. This is definitely live when you're fixing.
When you're fixing on the fly.
Let's see. So anyways, it ended up costing me. I didn't realize it at the time. And I didn't really even realize it until much later when I was looking back, and I thought, oh my gosh, like each time it sort of, pulled me down as it also kind of lifted me up. So it was a process that was quick. My desire to find a way to answer the questions that I didn't have, partly because I did have a hard time finding widow people in my generation. And
that I hear from younger widows is that people almost expect older generations to become widow at some point. Mm-hmm. And so the resources seem to be all focused on that. But that leaves the younger generation, when faced with a loss, whether it's traumatic or from a terminal illness or what have you, it leaves them feeling very, even more so of a fish out of water. So do you have any, thoughts for women who are young? I mean, it's been 13 years for you. Mm-hmm. And, yet widowhood affects people of all generations.
Absolutely.
And so, what makes it unique for someone that is younger? What do they face that's unique to the younger generation?
I think there's a few things. One is the expectation that you're going to replace your partner right away. And so there's a bit of pressure to, get someone new. And a lot of times that's well intended. People think they're offering you hope by telling you you'll find somebody else. But it can come across as that person's gone. You can get someone new before there's even time to grieve their loss.
Right. Yeah, because I think about, you're facing the marital bed without your spouse. Mm-hmm. And the emotions that go along with that are already very complicated. So meaning, what's that?
You also begin to realize how entwined your life is with the person who you share, from everything from where you sleep, to where you eat, to how you process, to who you call if you're flat tire, to who you call if you have the best news you've had in a long time. You realize quickly how enmeshed you become, regardless of how independent you are, as individuals. And so that was a surprise and a challenge, I think. But another thing that I think I found really surprising was that I thought that I could really only relate to widowed people of my generation. And I began my interview process in those very early days with a woman who was 50 plus years older than I was, who had been married for 50 4 years and whose husband died over a 5-year period of time. And I thought this would be a great first interview because I'm not going to feel like she's telling me my story, and maybe I can get a sense of how this will go. She ended up being able to finish my sentences. And it was such a great lesson for me to understand that there was much to be learned from any person who's experienced this. We both do it our same way. We both have our own individual challenges, but I also was not at all expecting for us to connect in the way we did. And it was a very powerful first connection. So I was grateful to put that on, actually, because it is such an isolating experience to feel like you're the only young person in your community who's struggling through, and many times, either raising children or missing the opportunity to have children, depending on how young you were and what your situation was in life. So I've learned so many amazing lessons from the widowed people I've met over the years.
There's something to be said for that wisdom of the older generation. They can pass on wisdom that, many times us younger generation, we roll our eyes and think, oh, here we go again. But it's really, really wise. I just recently, I hugged a bereaved mother who was 91 years old, and hugging her, because that's my journey, it's loss of a child. And so when I hugged her, it wasn't a thinking that there is 2 generations between us. It was a knowingness of, no matter how old you are, that loss is profound. Mm-hmm. And, but at the same time, I felt comfort in hugging a 91-year-old, woman who knew what my journey was. So I've got some more questions for you, but I see some people are asking questions. So let me double check here. So let's see. Okay. So Julie Jewell says, I lost my fiance 3 years ago tragically, only 36 years old, and our wedding was already set. Still a struggle. And so have you encountered that in any of your interviews with people who were, a fiance, they were getting married and lost their intended beloved?
Yeah, Julie, I'm sorry to hear about that loss. Yes. We definitely have spoken to widowed people. Is it reverberating again? Sorry, Julie. Okay, here we go. Hold on. Let's try that.
So do you think to some degree there's minimizing of those people who were, planning to get married and didn't quite make it to the altar because of a loss of one or the other? And so do you feel to some degree that their grief journey is minimized because people say, well, you weren't even married, or, in this day and age, many people share a marital bed before they're married, and they share a home and finances and
whole
so
life.
Yeah.
I do find that does happen, but I think also sometimes there's not a recognition of the loss of opportunity, the loss of the opportunity to have that life. And so I would like to say this to you, Julie Jules. I hope that you feel that you have had the opportunity to recognize yourself as a widowed person. Certainly, in Spirit's definition of the word widowed, you would certainly fit into our description of someone who is widowed. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times, there is a desire to be recognized as someone who has experienced that depth of loss. And sometimes people who were not legally married at the time that their partner died miss out on that opportunity. So I just want to take this chance to say that to you, Julie, that, I totally honor your loss and recognize how huge that must be for you.
Yeah. And I think that there is definitely, many, many parallels, because as you said, when you're married, or, when you lose a fiance, you lose, and you haven't had children together yet, you lose that opportunity, and to create the life that you had planned and envisioned with one another. So
many secondary losses that can be very, very painful.
Okay, so we've got some more questions coming through here. Okay, so Annette Isaacs says, people are asking me, are you dating yet? It has been a year and I'm still absolutely broken. And so Annette, thank you for asking that question, because that brings up, Michele, you remarried. Mm-hmm. And so what went through first off, did you think that you would ever remarry after you lost Phil? And then the second part of that question is, what emotions did you have to work through when you realized that you fell in love and intended to marry again?
So to answer the first part of your question, no, I did not think I would remarry. Partly for that same reason that I was so broken. Like I couldn't even imagine. I was having a hard time imagining the next day, let alone having the energy to meet someone and be able to offer them more than, kind of the lump of a mess that was still being a work in progress. That said, when I realized that I wanted the opportunity to share my life with someone again, the first thing I think I had to come to terms with was the fact that everyone that I was going to meet was human, and that there was a 50-50 chance at least that, that whomever he would be, would die before I would, and that I would be faced with this situation again. And the way that I framed that for myself was sort of twofold. The first is that I hear a lot of people talk about soulmates and say that they really only get one. And if they only get one, then now what? And the way I look at it is that the person that was with Phil, was married to Phil, died with him. That person had no idea what it was like to outlive my spouse. Hadn't had to create a life in the way that I have had to do. And so Phil was the perfect man for that, for my life with him. And I wanted to give myself the opportunity to have that again if it felt right. And when it did, I also had to just work on being able to accept that life will bring you whatever challenges it brings you. And that the love I had with Phil, if someone were to say to me, would you do it again, knowing how it all turned out, I would have said absolutely yes. And if that's true for Phil, then I find that that's also true for my husband, my new husband, Michael.
Right. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I hope that helps, Annette. So let me.
Also, Annette, take your time. 1 year is not very long at all. So, you have to sort of honor what's in you. And if it's the right time, or even if you decide you want to do it at all, that's 100% going to be an evolving process. So, people say it generally because they want you to be happy, and that's a way they imagine you might be happy. So they're kind of trying to hurry you along the path, but there's no hurrying. You have to take it at your own pace, and every one of us is different.
Right. We have this pressure within society that we need to fix things that are broken. And it's very uncomfortable for people to see us broken. They want to do anything within their power to see us happy. Mm-hmm. And so they mean well when they say, there's more fish in the sea, or are you dating yet? I know, so-and-so who's single. It comes from a place of wanting to see you happy. Mm-hmm. It's their heartfelt, but it can be very, very awkward, in any genre of loss when people try to rush that progress along, because when you become so broken, there is a rebuilding of self, and it takes time. And so it's okay for you to say to them, thank you for thinking of me, but right now I can only go day to day. So if I change my mind down the road, maybe not, I will let you know. So yeah. But I think that is, it's important to recognize that people mean well.
Well, and I think oftentimes they are completely unaware of how painful the words they say can be.
Right.
And so, here they are thinking they're being hopeful, and you're thinking, if you don't stop talking, I'm going to have to run out of the room. So it really can be, as honest as you're able to be with them, and every situation, of course, is going to be different. For some people, maybe it's not worth the energy that would be necessary to explain. But as many times as you can say, I'm doing this in my own time, and it's going to take however long it takes. Hopefully that can help people understand that it's not about, you can't fix death. The person who's dead has died, and that's one of our biggest challenges as a society. We don't know how to deal with things that can't be fixed, that you can't immediately put everything back together in a pretty package. And so that inability to sit in brokenness can sometimes result in painful words being said that really weren't intended to be painful. And they really sometimes don't even have a sense that they were painful. But it comes then back to the grievers for us to be able to honor our own process and take that pressure off ourselves, even if it's being placed on us by someone else.
Right. And I think to some degree, we bear the responsibility of educating people. Someone said to me the other day, she's still in bed. It's been 6 months and she's still in bed. I'm frustrated with her. And I looked at the support person who was sharing this concern about her loved one. I told her that it takes quite a long time to, rebuild yourself. And that when I lost my daughter in a traumatic fashion, I don't remember the first 2.5 years. And so I gave her some guidance and some things to think about. And a week later, actually, it was just a couple of days later, she saw me at dinner and she came over and she said, "Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I was able to pass that on to my sister." And she got out of bed for the first time. And what it did is it helped to educate that bereaved person's circle. And, only those of us who've gone through it can do that educating, right? And sure. So it's okay for you to say to those who mean well that, thank you, but this is a process and it takes time, and I am honoring that journey. And, it's grief is not something that can be rushed. So, and it's important not to rush it, or it can come back to bite you. So, yeah. So, Michele, what do you want family and friends and the support circles of widows to know?
So I love when people are so interested in being able to help. How can I help? How can I help? How can I help? What I ask them to do is to decide what's a small way they can help without having to ask that question. My favorite suggestion is buy a gift card for a local restaurant where the food could be picked up and or delivered, put it inside a card, mail it to the person and say, "I'm thinking of you. On a night when you don't feel like cooking, I'd like to buy you dinner." Because that removes from the widowed person or any grieving person the effort of me having to answer you, because now you're saying to me, "How can I help you? How can I help you?" And if I'm having a particularly difficult day and I can't remember my name or where I put my car keys, me being able to help you help me is not going to happen. And so, when one night when it was November, so Phil died in August, it was November, and I heard this commotion going on out in the front of my house. And I was just thinking to myself, awesome, my husband's dead and there's a commotion out front. So, I'm going to get some kind of baseball bat, and I'm standing behind my door looking through the window. And my neighbors were outside changing the windshield wipers on my car. Because they knew that it was supposed to rain that weekend and they didn't know if I needed new windshield wipers. And so rather than say to me, "What can I do for you?" they just snuck up and scared the heck out of me. But with the great intention of being able to help me do something that maybe I hadn't thought of. Same thing with lawn mowing, offering to take the kids in carpool, offering to if you're at the grocery store, literally in the grocery store, call someone and say, "I'm in the grocery store right now. Do you need milk? Do you need juice? Do you need bread? Do you need, I can just drop it off on your porch." Yeah. So then you remove from the widowed person or the grieving person, the responsibility of having to show you how they can help. It's those moments where you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm surrounded by people who care about me." The other thing I like to say to people is, many times people will say, "I'm here for anything. Call me anytime." My question to you is, do you actually mean that? Because I had 3 kids at home. If one of them had to go to the urgent care at 3 a.m., are you the person I can call to come sit with my other 2? And okay, so if it's not you, totally fine. If it is you, raise your hand really high. Because you need a list of people who you can count on at times when you would have had an automatic backup, right? So now you have to create your own backups. So
right.
Being able to create a backup list of people who say, if it's this kind of issue, you can help. If it's this kind of issue, you can help. That's a really valuable way. We talked about the opportunity for a cat, and here it is.
A very, really large cat, very insistent. So
right.
Come on, Max.
And really wanting to be a part of it. Anyway, having that list of people who support you through a variety of things is also a great way to be able to help.
Beautiful. Thank you. Because I think, so many people don't know how to help, and they say, how can I help? And then, it does put us on the spot to say, you know what? I don't know what I need. I don't know what I need. So how can I tell you what I need? So thank you for sharing the tips and such that you just gave. What do you think? It's been 13 years since you were widowed, and come on, Max. And that's not really a lot of time, but in the same time frame, we've also come really far in technology. And so with that being said, challenges change as well. And so what are some of the challenges that widows who are, widowed within the recent widows face that you didn't face?
One of the things for sure is being able to find social media support that's helpful for your style of grieving. When I was widowed, there was nothing like that. And so I wasn't choosing between one and another because there wasn't any. But now widowed people have a huge variety of online resources that are available to them, which I think is amazing and super valuable because, as we talked about, everybody does this their own way. And so if you have an opportunity to view a number of different places to get support, then, it can be overwhelming for sure, but it's also kind of a good problem to have. So what I just like to always remind widowed people, make sure that you are spending time with people who you feel supported by, who you feel lifted by. And it's easy sometimes to get sucked into experiences online that further traumatize you. So to just kind of be aware of making sure that you're looking at your online resources and saying, okay, does this mesh with, how I see the world? Does this mesh with how I see the world? And choose the ones that do, because there's a huge variety out there. And so there's, a place for everyone. I really think there's a place for everyone, and that the online support is incredible considering that so many people find themselves in a small town or, just in a place where they have not been able to find in-person support. So this online access is an amazing way to stay connected. And staying connected to a community is one of the best ways to build resilience.
Boy, that's for sure. It's when you're surrounded by people who speak your language, and when I say language, I mean the language of the heart, there's healing in that. Just coming together and, hearing the different stories. And I know that some people shy from going to support groups because they think, I can't possibly sit there and listen to all these other sad stories because I can barely handle my own.
Right.
But it's the healing. I recommend that everyone try it at least once. You don't have to go back again, but some find it where it becomes the one time in their month or their week that they look forward to, and they make friends that they wouldn't have made otherwise. And so, give it a try. And again, with the online support, there's a plethora of, different groups. And so if you don't find one that works, keep looking. And certainly Michele can hook you up. If you are, a new widow looking, contact Michele, and we'll give you the contact information at the end of the show so that you can get the resources that you're not finding, because they're out there.
Absolutely. I think it's also true of in-person support. Try more than one. If you went once and it was not good, try again. And the thing about it that's difficult is that you have such a small window of energy, right? And so how do we spend the small amount of energy we have? But I can tell you that the thing that has been by far the most valuable piece of healing for me has been being connected with the community. With being around other widowed people absolutely changed my life. And I cannot imagine how people who didn't have access to others have made it through. You and I talked about this briefly before the show started. What did people do when they couldn't find a community? I don't know. And I shudder to think for myself. So I just really want people to, if you take nothing else away from this tonight, find a community, because it really will make a difference.
They come in all shapes
the right fit, but it really makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also, I want to throw in another bit of, words of wisdom there, in that when we help others, it helps our own heart to heal. Mm-hmm. And so you might go to a support group and find it healing so much so that you end up leading a support group, or you find by volunteering somewhere in your own community, even if it's not in the bereavement world, if it's just somewhere, giving back, giving to others is very nurturing to our soul. Yeah, and so, even if it's not a support group, go out there in the world and find a place where you can be among others, because everyone's facing some kind of hardship. And when we realize that, we don't feel so alone. We don't feel like we're the one crazy person on planet Earth and everyone else has their stuff together. So
we've got to find our people.
Yeah, find our people. So let me see if there's any more questions here. Okay. Let's scroll through. Carla Smith brings up a very good point. People disappear. It's been 9 years and everyone is gone. I'm more lonely now than I was after he died. What's your thought on that, Michele?
Carla, find your people.
Oh.
I mean that it really does come down to that, though, doesn't it? Because I think what we discover is that in community, we have the opportunity to be heard. We have the opportunity for our loss to be validated, however long it has been. I think there is a sense out in the world that at some point you'll be done. Certainly at 13 years, people would think I'm done. 13 years and remarried, definitely done. And so to be in a community of people who understand the evolving nature of grieving a person that you love, it is absolutely just life affirming. And so it's really hard when the people around you disappear and don't acknowledge your loss. And again, it comes back to that sense of brokenness. If they feel like it can't be fixed, so many times they just start drifting away because they think, oh, well, that can't ever be fixed. Well, no, it can't be fixed. The dead person is still dead, and that's always going to be true. And so, when people say, how long are you going to be grieving? Well, as long as my person is still dead. Yep. So, that's just how it's going to be. But at the same time, you can rebuild a community, Carla. You can build your own community. And I know that takes energy, and sometimes it's hard to figure out how exactly to do that. But volunteering is a good start. Meetups where people share a similar, values to you and whatever your interests are is a good place. But when we build our own community, we start not feeling so alone in where we are. And it can just absolutely make all the difference.
All the difference in the world. So, Michele, if you could go back and give yourself 13 years ago words of wisdom from looking back to the time that you lost Phil and your time now, what would you say to yourself 13 years younger?
I think two things. The first is I would assure myself that I was never going to forget him. I was terrified that as, my human brain would continue to process all this other outside stuff, that somehow I was going to lose him in that. And 13 years later, I can tell you he's just as present as in my life as I've been. Obviously not physically, but he's in my heart, he's in my head. I think about him all the time. I talk about him all the time. So I think I would have been reassured by that sense that it wasn't going to be forgotten. And secondly, to be kind to myself. I pushed myself really hard, trying to meet other people's expectations, trying to make sure that I did everything the right way, trying to make sure that, if anybody were to see me, they would imagine that I was absolutely, doing Phil every kind of honor that could be possible. So I would have said, be nice to yourself. Treat yourself like you would treat your best friend if she were in your situation, because we can put that kind of pressure on ourselves and ultimately slow down our own healing because we don't allow ourselves the space to just be broken. And to be broken doesn't mean you'll remain broken forever. And those broken cracks, really are where the light comes in, as Rumi says. And so I don't know that I knew that so much then. I know that for sure now. And am able still even to see that in my own brokenness today.
Beautiful. Thank you. Where can our viewers contact you or look you up? What are the links and such that they should go to if they've got more questions or want to join Soaring Spirits International or Camp Widow?
Yes. So soaringspirits.org, and that's Soaring Spirits is plural.org, and you can find everything there. All our social media accounts are there. Information about all our programs are there. Information about Camp Widow is there. All roads eventually lead back to me. You'll be able to email us through there if you're looking for a community, you haven't been able to find them. Soaring Spirit's purpose is to build community for widowed people. That's what we do. Every single program we have is with the intention of helping to build widowed communities that will inspire people to rebuild their lives and not leaving behind what they had, but blending what they had with what they will have in the future.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thanks so much for joining me and my co-host, Max the cat, tonight.
He really wanted to be involved.
He decided he wanted to be part of the show more than once. So thanks so much. I appreciate it very much. And big hugs to all you viewers out there. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michelle. We'll see you.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.